SaGa is a series that the West really isn't that familiar with. Some of you in North America might know it as Final Fantasy Legend, but outside of North America, SaGa has barely seen a release anywhere except Japan. The thing is though, many of you have basically played a SaGa game and you just didn't know it. Elements that were first seen in SaGa have become commonplace in RPGs, but more recently there have been several attempts to recapture the magic of Romancing SaGa in particular. Legend of Legacy, The Alliance Alive, Octopath Traveler. The second you start playing Romancing SaGa 3, you are going to think to yourself, oh, so that's what these games were going for. Only 2 of those games were largely well received though, The Alliance Alive and Octopath Traveler. Was that because Legend of Legacy wasn't enough like Romancing SaGa? Actually, it's the opposite. Legend of Legacy was too much like Romancing SaGa. It adhered to those inspirations so tightly, and a lot of what Romancing SaGa has to offer in execution just doesn't fly in modern day gaming. Neither Legend of Legacy nor Romancing SaGa 3 are bad games, far from it, but they feel like games from a different time, and the latter literally is. Romancing SaGa's 3 narrative is split into 3 stories from the viewpoint of 8 different characters that become more intertwined over time. That sounds familiar. Progress in the game is very open and often unfocused or vague. That also sounds familiar. And characters don't have levels, they don't level up, instead relying on equipment and random stat boosts to grow more powerful. Are you guys seeing the pattern here? While so many mechanics, features and elements from SaGa have found permanent homes in gaming over the years, packaged the way they are in Romancing SaGa 3 makes for a daunting and often confusing experience, even for fans of old school JRPGs. Romancing SaGa 3 was an obscure experience back when it released, and it certainly hasn't become any less obscure in the last 24 years. Upon starting the game, you'll be given a choice of 8 characters, 4 male and 4 female, and depending on who you choose, the start of the game can be very different. A portion of the characters have very similar opening acts that will play out like a regular old school turn-based JRPG, but selecting Mikhail, for example, will drop you straight into a series of weird tactical army vs army encounters. If you play through several of the characters' opening chapters, you'll start seeing how all their stories begin to intertwine. You might play as Monica first and see her set off from the castle in search of Mikhail, then finding him and going your separate ways shortly after. Playing as Mikhail will reveal how he ended up where he was and what he does once he and Monica part ways. It was really groundbreaking stuff when it first released back in 1995. As you should expect though, the actual story, the writing and whatnot, it's all fairly limited due to the size limitations they had back then. After the short opening chapters, the game basically becomes one no matter which character you're playing as. There are differences in who is available to recruit into your party and where you start, but you are largely free to go wherever and do whatever you want. And you'll be required to do the same things to progress to the final chapter, though you have no idea what those things are. This main chunk of the game is where it basically becomes directionless. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the sophisticated maps, mini-maps, objective markers and journals we have today, and 1 being a hint or 2 from NPCs and maybe a mini-map if you were lucky, Romancing SaGa 3 is a -12. The combat, on the other hand, has aged very well. In fact, if you've played The Alliance Alive recently, you're basically already a Romancing SaGa 3 combat expert. They are pretty much identical. You have a chance for random stat boosts at the end of each battle, characters can use any weapon they like, skills are weapon specific and learned randomly by attacking with the weapon in combat, spells are purchased rather than learned, and you can create battle formations which provide buffs and bonuses. Music is another aspect that's aged wonderfully. This new version of the game doesn't come with a fancy orchestrated soundtrack, but it's just delightful all the same. Look, Romancing SaGa 3 is a masterpiece. It had ambitions well ahead of its time. If they had the technology back then that we have today, we'd basically be talking about this like we talked about Octopath Traveler, possibly something even better, but it is a product of its time. It is undoubtedly a valuable experience. You'll get to see the humble beginnings of elements you love that are in your favorite games today, but it is a tough game to play, even if you're a fan of old school RPGs. It's a neat history lesson and you should give it a shot, but if a history lesson isn't what you're after, The Alliance Alive is basically everything that Romancing SaGa 3 is, just expanded, modernized, and improved. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.